All right, let's jump in. So, welcome to our fourth series in Landmark Learns, showcasing social emotional learning. We're glad you made the responsible decision in joining us tonight. I have Tara and Rob here who will introduce themselves in just a second, our experts in responsible decision making. And we're looking forward to about the next hour, maybe a little bit less, of time to hear from them and their expertise, and also time for questions from you all. You can enter a question in the chat at any point in time. So if you've missed any of our previous sessions, this was a four-part series through Landmark Learns, starting in January, exploring the different pillars of social emotional learning. You can always go back and see the recording through using this QR code here. Today's session will also be recorded, so we'll be sending out that recording in about the next 24 hours to anyone who registered. Again, please use the Q&A function if you have any questions whatsoever. I will prompt Tara and Rob with questions throughout, and you're also welcome to wait till the end, but don't feel like you have to hold your question if it's specific to what they're discussing. You can also turn on closed captioning at any point in time by clicking CC or the live transcript button and choosing the show subtitle piece. If you are newly joining us, just a little bit of background on Landmark School. We are a school, or like we like to say, a mission with the school for students grades 2 through 12. All of our students have dyslexia or other language-based learning differences. Our high school also hosts a boarding program. We specialize in small classes, an individualized tutorial model, lots of other robust activities where students can find their aisle of competence, and also a summer program. In addition to our school, we have Landmark Outreach, which also serves educators, schools, districts, and even universities. And we find that in Landmark, obviously, we collaborate with students, families, advocates, and egg consultants as well. And Landmark Learns is really kind of a culmination of all those efforts joined together. So if you haven't been to one of these presentations recently, my name is Laura Polvinen. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm the Director of EMS Counseling and Community Engagement, and I'm thrilled to be your host tonight. It's been a wonderful adventure the past several webinars to talk about one of my favorite topics, social emotional learning, and how we not only see it with our students, but hopefully how to make it more doable and digestible at home, knowing that all of the time we're teaching our kids social emotional skills that help them be successful, independent, and kind adults. So I'll now turn it over to Tara and Rob.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. I'm Tara Jolie Laudermilk. My pronouns are she, her, hers. This is my 18th year at Landmark School. I am at the elementary middle school campus, which serves grades 2 through 8. And I'm joining you tonight just not as an educator, but also as someone who can see things through the lens as a parent as well. I have a son who is in 2nd grade, so I'm really thrilled to learn this and share all this information with you as well.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Rob Genatelli. My pronouns are he, him, his. I work at the high school campus. I'm the Dean of Students here. I'm in my 29th year as the Dean of Students. I live on the campus here and have for the entirety of my time here. My children are grown and gone, but enjoyed being on this campus for all those years as a family. So welcome.
Thank you so much, Tara and Rob. Together, they won't say it, but they boast probably more years of experience than I am old. So tonight, our objective is really to understand responsible decision making within that SEL framework we've been exploring. If this is your first session, we will go over aspects of the other pillars. It is not necessary that you've seen the others to enjoy tonight. We're going to really recognize the different opportunities that students have for learning these skills, and also adults. I spent a lot of time talking to Tara and Rob about how these are really aspirational. They're not a checkbox. And as we facilitate the learning for students about responsible decision making, we're also always confronted with decisions ourselves. And finally, we're going to wrap up with strategies that Tara and Rob use in their daily work all of the time at school, but more specifically ones you can try at home.
So let's just jump in a little bit for the agenda this evening. We've already done our introductions. We'll move through and review like every good Landmark teacher does. We'll circle back. We'll look at the SEL frameworks. We will then lean into the concepts in and around responsible decision making. And then Tara and I will split apart and look at both the complexities for like an elementary middle school age, and then I'll work into more of the high school realm. We'll talk about what we do at home, and we'll give you some opportunities to share with what we do at school as well. And then we'll kind of move through and finish up.
So, again, if you're just joining us or if you want a little quick recap of the past several months, because March felt like a while ago, we've been reviewing the 5 pillars of SEL. So, this is through the CASTLE framework. SEL, again, is social emotional learning, and it's a strength-based process that helps us develop skills, specifically, humans as healthy individuals as we develop. You'll notice in the center we have these pillars. We started speaking about self-management and self-awareness. Then we moved on to social awareness and relationship skills. And finally, we're ending tonight with responsible decision making. These are all kind of at the center of social emotional learning, but it's impacted and influenced by classrooms and schools, of course, families and caregivers, and the other communities that our students are a part of. And the graphic is a lot to look at, but we really find it useful because it shows the interplay between all of the different pieces. And it's not that classrooms are more important than families or caregivers. In fact, families and caregivers are on the outside more as like a holistic hug, if you will, to this process, because I think the structure and content is there so much with families and caregivers in the day to day. Tara, I'm wondering if you can share with us specifically a little bit more about the responsible decision making.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Laura. I think it's important to, in traditional landmark fashion, to just kind of to gain a better sense of responsible decision making, to just kind of review those other pillars to see how it all really connects. So if we think about self-awareness, it's that ability for students to understand themselves. Then there's that self-management piece and how they regulate their behavior. And then we look at social awareness, their capacity to consider others, and then those relationship skills needed to help kind of navigate interactions effectively. And how I see responsible decision making really is what students do with all of their SEL skills at the same time. So really, in other words, we're talking about being able to think about your actions and how you treat others and make kind and positive choices in different situations. And ultimately, our goal within that is understanding how students think, act, and grow.
Sounds easy. It's going to be a presentation.
Listen, Laura, I think the next thing that we talk about is just kind of the cornerstones for that of our decision making. And it's complicated. It's complicated to navigate all of these things. And let's not forget, kids are supposed to challenge and question their learning that is developmentally appropriate. At school, we really like to think of it and see it as growth and curiosity. And having kind of a set of shared expectations and values as the cornerstone of our decision making is really critical. Something we have been reviewing a lot at school this year and highlighting for our students is kind of our school values and kind of the expectations that we have. And questions we get often, and something you might be wondering on the call tonight, is when is that right time? When's the right time to start engaging in conversations with your young ones? Like, when does that happen? How does it happen? What does it look like? And the answer is, it's never too early. It's never too early to talk about what your values are, what your family values are, what your expectations are. And we know that the more we can scaffold and share what our values are, whether it's as a parent, a guardian, a family member, a teacher, a coach, the more that our young people will really start to build that infrastructure and kind of know in their gut. We talk about that gut feeling. That gut feeling really is kind of those cornerstones of our values. And it kind of helps guide them when that moment happens in making more expected, some people would say, but really healthy decisions when those times come.
If you're a parent like me, juggling all the pieces, Tara, is there a time it's ever too late to talk about values?
Never.
Great.
I won't share my age, but it's something that my mother and I talk about as recent as yesterday.
Definitely feels like a valuable discussion, I guess, to as things grow and change. I know you've also included a resource at the end for families to utilize a little bit in exploring family values. So if you're thinking, Man, we've never really had that conversation in a concrete way. Rob and Tara have pulled some resources together you can explore for ways to decide about how you want to discuss what your family values are. Because you probably don't have, my guess is a visual image like we have in the corner of your screen, but maybe you'll create one. Who knows? I think, family crest or something can be really powerful. Rob, I'm hoping next you'll maybe share with us a little bit about understanding kind of the aspects of decision making.
Sure, happy to. So let's think just a minute. I love the graphic that's there, right? It reminds me of a multi-lane highway, that you have to pick and choose which way you're going to go. Think of all the things that need to be integrated in that process. I think when we look at the decision-making model and understanding decision-making, we really are talking about teaching them and helping young people understand that their actions and words do actually lead to consequences. Think about it, I say to students all the time, when you work really hard on your homework or you study really hard for a quiz and exam and you get an A on it, that's actions leading to positive consequences. Conversely, when you don't do that, then there's a negative consequence. So we spend a lot of time, and I'm very word and language specific. I don't talk about punishments. I don't talk about being anything punitive. I want them to always understand that their actions and words lead to consequences, and they have agency and choice in that process. And part of that, and I don't know, Tara, when you begin to see it in the elementary to the middle school years, but at the high school years, it really is about helping them become aware and accountable to the choices that they make, the things that they say, the actions that they take have an impact on somebody else, either as an individual or as a community at large, and begin to recognize the importance of being respectful of those communities or that individual. And then I really sit back sometimes and worry about, are we as adults, are we being intentional in the choices that we're showcasing, and pointing out to them when that occurs? Because those opportunities, those choices, they need to be practiced and taught, but they have to be witnessed and seen. I'll give you an example. At the high school campus, there's no technology in the cafeteria, not on your cell phone. And I monitor that space pretty frequently, and I'm prompting students to put them away, put them away, put them away. Um, the other day, my phone was buzzing, and I sidestepped where I was, walked into a corner, kind of stuck my face in the corner to be on my cell phone, and I put it in my pocket, and I turned around, and there were a table of girls there, and they looked at me and said, "Wow, Mr. G, you actually do what you say you're going to do." And I looked at them, of course. I said, "This is what is important to me that you see and represent that." So as we work through the concept of understanding decision making, it is an intentional practice to make sure that those that are watching and paying attention, that we lead by example. So we can break it all down for them and we can tell them everything that they need to be. But if we don't showcase that in an intentional way, it isn't integrated into the working base of knowledge.
I love that, Rob, and I love that you were describing kind of using consequences as a language that doesn't have to be punitive or negative, that consequences are just what happens as a result of an action. Because I think even that we all hope to walk the walk that we talk, but obviously we may not always. And I think the ability to model the consequences or understand, um, if I, for some reason, can't model exactly what I hope for, I can talk about it. And hopefully that will help students understand in the other pieces of the consequence too. So I think, Terry, you're going to tell us a little bit about decision-making levels, and maybe give us some quick examples as we move through too, because I think the majority of the examples you guys will both give in the future are going to be focused on mid-decision making choices tonight.
Yeah, definitely. So it's important to know, like most things, there's a scale for this. And we think about decision making, we have low level decision, right? Those are quick choices, kind of a small impact. Then we kind of look at this mid level, where you kind of think it through a little bit, and there might be some potential consequences. And as Laura said, that's what we'll really kind of focus on this evening. And then there are those high decision making levels of kind of big choices that could have big impacts on either you or others. Something that a quick thing that comes to mind just for us to give examples of would be homework, right? So something low level of homework would be rushing through my homework, knowing it's not my best work, but I still turn it in. The mid level is choosing not to do my homework and knowing that there might be consequences for not doing that. And then that higher level would be uh, doing my homework, but either copying a friend or cheating or using AI and not citing those sources that could really kind of lead more down a plagiarism level than really just kind of circling back to that mid level of I didn't do it and taking those consequences for what they are.
Definitely. Rob, I'm wondering, just thinking about your example of the phones in the cafeteria, it seems like I wonder at first if students feel like that's a big, almost consequence. And maybe when you're first interacting with them, they really have to think it through. But then by the time it becomes habit, it probably feels like a very quick, low-level decision for them.
It sure is, and I think an important piece in all that is I'm intentional in explaining to them the why. Why is it that we have the policy, as opposed to just enforcing a policy and then recognizing my authority as the dean of students, or even in my own household as a dad. I, it was important to me to be intentional in explaining to my children and the students I work with here the why. Why do I want you to put your cell phones away while you're in the cafeteria? And explaining to them the why, regardless of what level it is the decision making occurs, helping them understand the why. Why am I saying no? Why am I redirecting you? Why does this policy exist? Why do we have expectations or standards of expectations, both in like the social emotional realm or in the academic realm? It's the why. That's really important to me that they understand. So much of their world and so much of their life through the high school, all through public education, they don't have a lot of agency and choice. But if you can empower them with the knowledge of why those decisions have to be made and the how come, and give them an opportunity to be part of it. I walk through the CAF now, and you walk by a table and there'll be a stack of cell phones there, and the kids will be engaged. And I love that they independently just stack their phones or they cue each other. And my favorite one was kind of in early October when a staff person came up to me, was frustrated at the volume in the calf. Like it's so loud in here now. And I'm thinking to myself, and I actually said, I'm like, I know, isn't it amazing? All their cell phones are away and they're actually engaging in dialogue and in connection and in community. That's awesome, isn't it? I'm not sure she really heard my sarcasm in my tone a bit, because it was intentional. But I was thrilled that the volume in the dining hall is really loud.
Absolutely. All right, so let's move a little bit from the why to the what, Tara. I know you're ready to tell us a little bit more about the what of decisions.
Yeah, I think folks often ask, like, what does it take? We talk a lot about the micro unit plans here at school, and really, like, when you think about all of the components, and I know Rob's going to talk about this in a bit too, but like really breaking down what it takes to make a decision. Again, I really think it takes all of those SEL pillars, and then it also takes the ability to have that pause, to regulate, to kind of consider the options that are in front of you, to weigh the choices with the values that you hold, asking or getting the help if you need it, which can be really challenging. And then ultimately, you make a decision and then trusting yourself enough, being vulnerable enough to act on that decision. And then coupled with all of that, there's also the idea of really making sure that there's this huge dose of executive functioning that comes into play when we are making decisions, because they can happen in an instant for some, and for some of us, we kind of perseverate and worry if we're going to make the right decision or not.
Can't imagine any of us have ever overthought a decision before or made an impulsive one, I'm sure.
And,
So,
and I have to say, Laura, I think it's something we talk about with our families. And to Rob's earlier point about cell phones, when we talk about having a dress code, this is one of those things that we've heard both students and families say, taking that decision out of it has been so helpful, because there are so many other decisions that our student has to make in a day, that this is something that just feels right for them, and they just kind of move on from it.
that makes sense.
Eric, how much of your day is spent on this slide?
A lot.
Yeah, mine too.
Me three. More on the top half. All right, I think now, Rob, if we can, speaking of kind of that pausing or impulsivity piece or perseveration, can you chat with us a little bit about our specific population and decision making?
Absolutely. I spend a lot of time in this. This part is really important. So when we look at the impact that the learning challenges present for our population, our students, when you think of comprehension, most people think of reading comprehension. But what about social comprehension? What about reading the room correctly? What about being able to walk into the cafeteria where everyone's seated and you're not sure where to sit? The opportunity to be able to be aware of that, read the room, read facial expressions. For us, ever been in a situation where you see someone stopping and pausing as they're trying to figure out what it is that they're witnessing, that whole processing concept, either visual processing or auditory processing, using that opportunity to figure that information out. And being mindful of giving them the opportunity to do that without over jumping them or overstepping them, to do that for them, to give them the opportunity to find that time and that understanding on their own. I think I spend a fair percentage of my time in that perspective, making sure they are able to see. And I will often on my desk, if I'm working with two students that are in a state of conflict, I will construct some weird thing on my desk and ask each of them, what do you see? And of course, they see it differently. And then I say, this is what I see. So who's right or who's wrong? And to really give them and help them have an understanding that other people have a different perspective that needs to be witnessed and seen and valued. And sometimes that's really hard when you're frustrated or heated. And then, of course, with a number of our students, the ability to communicate what you think and feel, to be able to find it and communicate what you think and feel. I was in a situation very recently, that like this week, with a student who was engaged in a conversation with a couple of other adults, trying to work through a situation. And he stopped and looked at me and said, Mr. G, can you help me here? And really what he was asking for was coaching in that moment. Couldn't come up with the word that he wanted to. He was getting frustrated. And so he and I had been in that process before. So he looked at me and we worked it through, and then he turned back to the group and was in that space with them. So when I think about and we look at decision-making models, language and language comprehension and all of its aspect of it is a huge piece in the facilitation of a decision. And then I think all the time, like, if it wasn't for impulsivity, I think I would have very low job security. But that's a huge piece of my world here. And I asked a student years and years ago, I said, like, why did you do that? And he looked at me and said, I don't know, I was having an LD moment. And at first I thought he was just being kind of like sarcastic or a little bit disrespectful. But I stopped and I got curious and I said, explain that to me. And he's like, well, Mr. G, at the moment in time, these are all the things that were happening. And this is a decision I reached, so I went with it. And now, after I'm sitting in your office and we're talking about it, I realized it was just an LD moment of time. And I instantly just accepted that as a reasonable response. So that piece is in there, that the learning challenge, the decision-making process is compromised at times, or impacted, maybe a better word, with the aspect of their learning profile and their comprehension and their language and all those pieces. And then we can never take away that they all come to us with an experience, with a life experience. I say to them all the time, what's in your luggage? What are you carrying here? What do I need to know about you that I don't know? Because that impacts the decision piece. The awareness of who's around them and how their behavior impacts others. All of those things come together. And I think we oftentimes, as adults, I certainly think working with other people's children, I sometimes don't remember that I need to encourage and nurture their intuition. Like to teach them to trust their gut, even if those around them are giving them a completely different message. I talk to them all the time, like, that little voice in your head that you hear, that's your conscience speaking. And if you can learn to lean into it, it will help guide you well. And so all of those things, this whole slide, all of these bullet points, those things have to happen at a millisecond to be in space and place to make a decision. And it's really sometimes interesting to watch them get to a decision, but I also sometimes find that for them, it's kind of challenging when they reach a decision, but they miss several pieces along the way.
Absolutely. I mean, decision making is so complex for all of us, but add in these layers of a learning difference. And, we have the benefit of our students being incredible problem solvers. So that helps with decision making for sure. But I think, like you're saying, the process can be incredibly taxing.
It's exhausting. This is my absolute favorite slide that I have been coming out of a larger presentation about really understanding language processing. So as we look at this, we're going to go left to right. So start with a situation X, right? It's occurring. You lean in and you perceive it. my experience is you got a 50-50 shot that their perception is accurate. So let's assume that it is accurate, right? And so then they move to, once they perceive it, then they have to process what they're seeing or what they're experiencing. They have to translate that into a function of language. Give you a quick example. You walk into a lecture that's already unfolding. You have to see what's going on, translate it into a function of language, and tell yourself, sit down, right? It's already started, sit down. So they have to process and integrate that concept of what they're seeing, translate it into a function of language, right? And that's where that gift of time comes. I don't know, sometimes you can just see the wheels spinning and you just be patient and wait. So they have to process the situation, integrate what they have now turned into a function of language, and then they go into response and retrieval. Now they have to find an action plan that goes along with it. And this is where that beautiful gift of impulsivity jumps in. So there, options A, B, C, and D, and they take option A because that's the first one that comes to it, and then they respond. Now, that whole mechanism is instantaneous. But can you imagine if your perception is inaccurate? Everything else that comes after that is going to send you into a direction that is not going to come out with an effective or a healthy decision. So the reason why there are arrows back and forth is, so some of the work I do, like, okay, we're at the end, right? You saw option A, you took option A. Now I need to spend time problem solving with you about whether B, C, and D was more the correct option, or going backwards to the actual perception and help them correctly perceive it or clean up the perception. And then you watch the light bulb go out as they move that forward. And this process happens 1,000 times a day. Think of how many decisions you make. This whole mechanism has to happen every one of those times. And if your system isn't efficient, that you get stuck in either processing or integration, or your retrieval aspect is impulsive, or your perceptions sometimes are askew. It's a lot that can go wrong. And I often worry about, and I see this happening, a student getting in trouble. Tara, how many times does a student end up in your office and you say, why are you here? And they say, I have no idea. And they genuinely don't, because their perception was inaccurate. They moved through this whole thing and went to retrieval. And for them, it makes logical sense. And I know as a parent working with my youngest, who is now 27, who was diagnosed in kindergarten, this process at times for me was absolutely maddening. And part of it was because she was my kid and she could light me up like a Roman candle in 2.2 seconds. Your kid doesn't, because I can see this model and know how to move back and forth between it. So I think that's also a piece that we need to really acknowledge, that parenting is hard. And you might learn all these things and figure out all these things. But when you actually try to do them with your own children, sometimes it's not as easy. But this mechanism, for me, I say all the time, like, if you spend time in this and really see this and watch it unfold, it gives you a better sense of understanding and ability to help them navigate complex situations.
Absolutely. And it takes out that willfulness. Sorry, Tara, where at times we can feel like our students are making willful choices versus actually there's a mismatch in the puzzle pieces, if you will.
And
Sorry.
a teenager isn't going to let you know that. They're going to try to fake it till they make it, or they're going to try to save face, which always inevitably just makes the situation compounded. And so you have to strip it back and begin to help them understand where it went askew to help them move forward.
I know we're about to jump into some examples, but we have a great question that I think fits in really well with this process for both of you, because I'm sure you'll have, let's say, adjacent answers. So when that impulsivity kicks in, a lot of times during that retrieval piece, what are some strategies you can use or chat through with a student to help them have that pause in the moment instead of that impulsive act?
Yeah, I think a huge piece of that is really being able to have a student, if possible, kind of separated from the situation, right? So you're really leaning in, as Rob said. It's kind of leaning in with patience and grace and curiosity to really give them that time to reflect. Like, tell me what was happening right before that happened, or what were you thinking about before you said blank. I think it's really helping our students to have that opportunity. And a lot of times students will say, like, I don't know, I just did it. But it really is, I think, the more you sit we call it sitting in it with them, um, you will find that they just need a moment longer to actually think about and review what happened prior. And then they're able to say like, oh yeah, I wanted to say that because I didn't want to forget. And so I think that it is that. I think it's allowing a space and time, rather than just kind of a quick, curt um, redirection, because that's not actually teaching them.
So it
They're
sounds
they're
like
just they're going to continue to.
go through it over. It sounds like we're kind of giving them an opportunity for the pause after the fact to process. Because maybe in the moment, if they're not pausing, they need that time after to reflect on why didn't that happen? Where were they maybe able to build in the pause in future instances?
So can I jump in just for a second? So
Of
Tara said
course.
something that I just want to expand on. She used the word curiosity. There is no judgment in curiosity. So when the student you're working with or your child does something and it's impulsive, we're really quick to move to judgment because we're frustrated or angry at the behavior. But if you can really process in your brain to lean in with curiosity and ask those curious questions, honey, I'm curious how you got there. Help me understand how you got there. Then you can see it all unfolding and you might be able to give them some opportunity to think it through or create a different strategy. I ask students that all the time. They're in my office. Why are you here? I have no idea. Great, let's dig into it. Why does your teacher think you're here? If I called your teacher, what would they say? Or they come in because they're in trouble and I know the story and the situation. I ask them, I'm super curious, how did you get there? And they walk this process through with me. And then I add some additional points in there that they miss and then ask them to reprocess it. And then you can see the light like, oh, yeah, now, oh, yeah, no, yeah, yeah, no worries. I know now I have detention. Great, we're on the same page. So that curiosity, I train staff, I really push on that notion. If you lean forward with curiosity, there is no judgment in curiosity.
Absolutely. And I'm wondering too about the opportunity at times, you all are providing this curiosity afterwards, but then at a time you maybe see an impulsive student who doesn't make an impulsive decision. That reflection there too of like, wow, it seems like you really thought that through or, took different steps there. Because I think even when we're impulsive, not every decision we make is impulsive, even if it feels like, especially as a parent, the vast majority are, to kind of highlight those other moments as well. All right, so I know Tara's having a little trouble with her connection. We hope she'll join us back. But Rob, I'm hoping you can walk us through like some of the decisions, specifically some examples that come through your door or across your desk in terms of academic decisions students are making that come up at school, social decisions, those familial or personal decisions. And you can, pick your favorite.
So I love the academic one because on the high school level, hi Tara, good, welcome back.
Sorry.
Um, on the academic level, I think the biggest decision that kids are making every single day is to ChatGPT AI or not ChatGPT AI. I teach a class, and the first day of class, I say to them, okay, take out a piece of paper. Here are three writing prompts on the board. I don't care which one you pick. Write me a paragraph. So they write me a paragraph and I collect them all. And then the next class, I say, okay, here are the three writing prompts. Lean into ChatGPT or AI and spit out a paragraph. And then I look at them and say, now I see the differential between your writing tone skill, grammar, punctuation, and ChatGPT and AI. And they look at me and like, Mr. G, that's so not cool. And I think to myself, I think it's brilliant. So the academic decisions, that is probably the most relevant one that kids are being faced with all the time. Because the speed at which it can occur, there's so many forms of AI now that they're developing it faster than we as educators can keep up. So that for me is probably one of the largest concerns that I have as a educator in a high school realm, and I certainly know in the collegial realm, it's becoming increasingly more challenging.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I think they're weighing those different options. It's going to take me a long time. I'm not confident in what I'm saying. Is this allowed? Is it not? My teacher never said anything. Absolutely.
But I
And
love the new one. A staff person just sent this article around that there's this a new version of called Einstein. And as an educator, when you're working in Google platform, you can look at revision history. So you can see, hey, you spent 1 minute here and you've got three paragraphs. Something's up with that. Well, now this Einstein AI will create the same approach, but it'll spit it out over time. So you can't tell, one paragraph or one sentence in a minute or three sentences in 2 minutes, and it looks like you're actually doing it, and it's total AI that's generating all of that. It is brilliant, but it is increasingly challenging.
Absolutely. Tara, we're glad you're back. Your internet made the responsible decision to cooperate. Um, can you give us a social or maybe a personal or familial example that comes across your desk with the elementary middle population?
Sure, yeah. So I think friendships are really important. I think from a social perspective, because I think a lot of times our students are really learning and practicing those um, kind of impulse control and like the emotional regulation piece. And I think a lot of times what we start to see, whether it's in fifth grade or eighth grade, it's really how to interact with your friends. How do you respond to someone who is upset with you? Do you decide to kind of ignore it and kind of stick with your group? Do you dismiss them? Do you support them? Do you lean into that? Or, I think when we start to see with some of our older students is, do you engage in the rumors? Are you someone who's going to continue to um, share information that you don't know is true or not? For the sake of and I don't think kids are doing it to be rude or disrespectful or with ill will, but it's drama and it feels like entertainment to them. And if they can't have their phones at school, it's something that, again, kids are kids, they're going to do that, but it's something we see a lot here at school is kind of the back and forth of the drama sphere, I like to call it.
Well, and I wonder how you both are seeing that kind of social dynamic play out for students where, like you said, I don't think they're ever intending to harm, but it's that balance of what are my personal or familial values and what are my friends valuing, and those things are not the same, perhaps. Like, how do I juggle that? I wonder if you both could kind of give us a concrete example of something like that you've seen, because I think I don't have an adolescent yet, but I feel a little bit like the elementary population is already headed that way of just how to balance. Like I'm saying at home, we are kind, we are connected, we are thoughtful, and at school it is cool to call people names.
Mhm.
I think at the high school level, from a social space, Laura, your statement, I don't think they're intentionally trying to be hurtful or mean. That's not always the case at the high school level. I mean, the reality is it's not the case. Um, my hope is always that families establish and create values that they operate as a family, that their children come to high school with a strong sense of a strong moral compass, that they lean into their values as a decision-making component. The interesting part for me is that you can have multiple kids in the same social media, Snapchat, Instagram, TikTok disaster, and some are kind of drawn into it because that's the space that they want to be in, and that their compass is slightly not as developed, and others just get stuck in it because they don't have exit strategies out. They want to be there with their friends, save face, look cool. They don't know how to get out of the situation. So for me, I challenge parents like, what are the conversations you're having with your children about your value systems in terms of being on social media or how uh, the word intrusive comes to mind. But as a parent, I was pretty intrusive into my children's social realm at times that I needed to be to make sure that they were making good choices and good decisions. I remember a period of time that this was a long time ago. My daughter was young that uh, somehow our phones got paired. I have no idea what she did, but every single text message that she was getting for a period of time from all of her friends was coming up on my phone as well. And I didn't tell her for a little bit of time because I could just innocently spy and say, because I didn't create this. And then when I got to the place where I'm really realizing, okay, this is really okay, I went to her and said, how do you get this off my phone? And she was indignant. I'm like, hey, don't look at me. I didn't do it. You did it. But get it off my phone. It's driving me crazy. But I wanted to know the types of choices and decisions she was making based on our family systems of values. So that whole social piece at the high school realm, and certainly the impact of social media, it is more challenging to navigate. I will tell you, probably 20%, 20 to 30% of my work week is dedicated to dealing with online behavior.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Laura, I think from the elementary middle school level, we're really talking about older, like if we start thinking about fifth graders into eighth graders, they're starting to develop a greater sense of independence and responsibility. And then as you get a little older, there's that peer influence, and identity. And I say peer influence, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I think there are times where they can have impacts because they don't necessarily align with um, maybe what that student is feeling or what their family feels. And I can't stress enough the importance of family partnerships that we have with families at school, because that allows us to engage truly what we're trying to do. And it's the very best part of my job, which I feel like is, we have these amazing teachers in language arts, right? And I feel like Rob and I have this, and even you, Laura, this incredible job in that we get to help teach our kids life skills. And it is that it's, for fifth graders, how are they navigating their family beliefs? And kind of peer opinions. Like their families decided they're not ready for a device yet, but yet they're going to continue to ask because their peers are kind of saying like, "Hey, we're all getting together on FaceTime later tonight. Like, why can't you join us?" And then I think that's even more so for our older eighth grade students when you start talking about those family values, when you're building your identity, and friendships, and then how do you lean in as an upstander when you know in your gut something doesn't feel right? And that is something that they have to balance. Is the risk worth the reward? And I do feel like that is something that our kids are facing all of the time, whether it be via social media, or just kind of navigating conversations of hey, this is what I believe in. This is what is important to my family. And so, no, I'm not going to do that. Or, hey, why don't we try this instead? Um,
Absolutely.
is important.
So thank you for the kind of uh, as the kids say, the hot goss on what happens with you all at work. But I'm wondering if you can, just in the interest of time, give us maybe each a quick example of what types of decisions you hear about kind of in the home environment that are coming across your desk, either from students or through teachers or parents, families.
Mhm. Yeah, I'll
I
just
think
I'll say quickly, and maybe Rob, if you just want to build upon it, I think we hear from an academic standpoint, um, you know, our eighth graders maybe they're just trying to figure out like when am I going to do my homework, and when am I going to study versus some of the other things I have going on in my life.
Hmm. It's kind of like the
I think
logistics of planning
on,
and yes.
on the high school level, they're really beginning to establish and try to figure out who they're going to be in the world, right? How their values and morals align with what they've been taught from home and how sometimes they don't align with what they've been taught by home. They want to come out and find their own. I think like the decision-making model in high school centers more around risk-taking, driving a car, the exposure to substances, sneaking out, all of those pieces now become very real. And that again aligns with the value systems that have been entrenched in them.
Absolutely. Oh man, it's a good thing we all signed up for this parenting thing, huh? Never a dull moment. Well, I'm thinking we can move a little bit now into kind of some pro tips, some um, takeaways for folks to think about as they are considering what to do with their families at home and their students.
Well, for me, I think it can't be by accident. You have to, with intention, really make sure that you are showing them the value system and the decision making you want from them. Recognizing everything of who they are, but giving them the opportunity to expand, grow, learn, fail. Failure is a huge and important part of growing and teaching them how to fail and how to get back up, how to reach out to ask for help when they need it. All those things are critically important. And I don't think we model and teach that in our world today. It's certainly not represented in our geopolitical realm. It's certainly not represented in what they see and are involved with in television and in movies. It is something that needs to occur. For me, it's twofold in the home and at school. And that, as Tara said, that strong partnership.
Absolutely. I know we talked in earlier sessions about the importance of our own regulation because we have to let our students be dysregulated in order to practice. It's very easy to be regulated when everything's calm and fine, just as much as it's easy to make an easy decision, but you need practice making hard decisions. So I love that you're highlighting like we have to be intentional about this. We can't just be accidental. And I think that risk of us making all of the decisions for them because it's easier doesn't ever give them the opportunity. Or I'm sure you have families sometimes who call and try to excuse away a decision or a choice, whether it be based upon disability or just, impulsivity, or they weren't being thoughtful in that moment, they didn't get enough sleep, and trying to say, like, we need to teach our kids that they're going to make poor decisions, sometimes intentionally, sometimes not, and there's still consequences, and we don't always get to fix it.
I appreciate you saying that so much, Laura, because it's the one thing that I think in conversations that I have often with families is like, it is so critical. Rob and I waxed on about this for a while the other day, but it's so critical, especially for our students, that it's not an excuse, but we really help build skills that they are able to practice and know, like, we're all humans, we're all going to make mistakes. We're all going to have moments where we act impulsively, and we're all going to have moments where we kind of perseverate on the decision we're going to make. But it's really practicing, like, where's the balance and where does it feel right for us individually, because we are all individuals, and what might be right for one student is not right for another versus a parent or a guardian or, a caregiver. So I think that's important too, is just to be aware as we kind of work with our kids.
And let's be serious, sometimes it is massively inconvenient. The last thing you want to consider to have to be thinking about and doing, but you have to be mindful of what you're teaching or what we're teaching children. Kids watch me all the time. If I am on my cell phone in the cab for a millisecond, they're all like pointing at me. Look, in my role, the visibility of my role, the authority sometimes that my role creates, I need to really walk the walk. But in my personal life, it was, getting out with the grocery cart to the car with my 10-year-old son, putting everything in the car and realizing there was a package of batteries in the bottom of the cart that I didn't pay for. I could have just thrown it in the bag and walked away, but what am I teaching him? Instead, I took him out. I said, look, honey, like, we have to go back. And we walked back in. I paid for the batteries and we came back out. It wasn't what I wanted to do in that moment, but I knew it was something that was important to do. So sometimes while we're presenting all this, look, I totally get it. Sometimes it is inconvenient and a colossal pain to be intentional in the modeling and teaching good decision making.
Think we covered our modeling right here. Just kind of a great tactic at home. We are always modeling, we are always on. And I think, as you've heard from Rob and Tara, anytime you can take that opportunity to remember your modeling. Boy, is it exhausting, but inviting your kiddos into that conversation, your young people, into what you saw, or, I can imagine, Rob, if you were flying somewhere from that grocery store, you might say, listen, I'm going to come back tomorrow with the batteries and pay for them if I can't do it in this moment. At least acknowledging what the plan is and kind of that pausing is so valuable. So, what else? What about this? Because I always think about how do our kids practice, especially with a language-based learning difference? How do they know what to say in the moment?
Yeah, I just feel like the more we can script and practice, and that it's good for us too as adults, really just to kind of shift the conversation. And it really is meant to be a conversation. It is not meant to be a lecture or kind of talking back and forth, uh, but really kind of coming back to, whether it's family values or school values or whatever values you might hold in your lives, um, that it's about that and rooted in learning and growing, not just the consequence that might come with it. Rob and I have shared too. We promise you that we are much shorter and concrete. That we do that with our students, but it is important for that to happen. But then just really kind of like, if I did this, then kind of statements. So if I didn't do my assigned work, then my boss might ask to meet with me, kind of conversations.
For me, I use the phrase as soon as a lot. As soon as you complete this task, then you can do this. As soon as your homework is done, then you have the access to free time. As soon as clean up your room, then you can go down to the gym. So that aspect, that scripting too, is just about creating agency for them, control for them. And the value of all that is recognizing and seeing them as young people who need some element of control and agency and choice in their lives. I can create the language around that so they get what they need, but I get the room clean, right? So it works. It's a win-win. And sometimes we come at it more from an authoritarian standpoint. You need to go clean your room because I said so. How many of us have ever foolishly picked up the rope in that game of tug of war with, for me, Laura and Tara aren't quite there yet, but you get there with a 14 or 15-year-old. Come on, that is no one wins that game. So if you can create scripted language around being aware of that and always circling back to what's important for us as a family, what are the values that we create, recognizing that in the absence of us as parents instilling values in our children, the world, the social media will backfill that void, and there are rarely values that align with what you would want them to be or who you want them to grow to become. And that for me is, I worry about that.
Well, and like you said, I think having that script in the back of their head means they've practiced it when they have no grown up around. That's the habit they can fall back on, which is wonderful. All right, we're getting to the end here. I know we want to make time for a few more questions, so let's chat a little bit about some follow-up at home. I know we've talked about the lead with curiosity piece.
Yeah.
What do you have for us?
Yeah, I think that leading with curiosity is critical. I think also just being able to reflect on the situation, as we mentioned earlier. What were you thinking about before? Or was there a time during that where you could have made a different choice? I think the other piece is really validating them, right? It's the choice you made versus like who you are. Maybe it was a poor choice and it doesn't align with our values, but I still love you and you're not a bad person. It goes a very long way. And then just looking like the impact and repair, right? So I know that maybe you had a situation with this person, like how can you make it right with them and repair the situation? And then also to just kind of practice, like if you were in this situation again, what would you do instead, or how could you have made a different choice?
Love that
And
room is room
don't
for
be afraid
growth.
don't be afraid to lean into the discomfort of that kind of practice, right? Look, we're going to role play this out. Look, I'm going to script this with you a little bit. Look, I want you to practice this. Don't be afraid to lean into that discomfort as a parent, because we certainly do it all the time as the teacher of other people's children. I'm very comfortable in that moment of discomfort with your child to help them get to that space or to role play that out with them. I offer that to them all the time and help them kind of guide them through that process. I don't know where it ever happened when I was a kid. And I know I strive to do that as a parent. And I get like sometimes it's really hard because in the moment, I don't have time to do all this. It just needs to get done. Because look, we were supposed to leave a half an hour ago, and at the rate we're going, we're not going to leave for another 20 minutes. So let's go. Move the job along, get in the car. Sometimes you don't have the time to sit and create that space, but when you can, it establishes a foundation for future conversations.
I like to think that adolescents think all of us adults are cringy at some point, so might as well lean in, right? All right, I think we're gonna spend about a moment here and then open it up for some questions.
So think about what's important, prioritize what you need and want. If you're coming at your child with 15 things, you need to pick and choose, right? What are the most important things to move toward them with? And then remember who they are as people. Where are they functioning developmentally? I will tell you straight up, if your child has learning challenges in the language-based areas and they're immature and they're in high school, you're dealing with the 15-year-old body with the 13-year-old decision making and processing, and you need to recognize the developmental shifts and be able to shift between both of those places with a level of knowledge and ease. So it creates that opportunity for them to grow and learn, but doesn't squash their spirit in the process. And then for me, at the very least, there are times as adults, we just simply need to step in and make the choice. Give them as much control as possible. At the end of the day, my kid wasn't choosing certain things. I was choosing them. I might give them, here are your three options. I'm comfortable with any one of them, but these are the only three options that we're going to create. And because sometimes it is my choice as the parent, or frankly, my choice as the educator or the teacher, that this is the direction it needs to go, and not be afraid to do that.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes, if we consider the other SEL pillars, kids aren't regulated enough. They're not managing themselves to make a decision. So we have to do it for them at a variety of ages, not just for our younger students. All right, we're going to take questions now. It could be about your specific student. It could, well, not by name, but it could be, a specific challenge you faced with your student. It could be in general, something you're wondering from Tara or Rob. All right, Tara, you want to wrap us up? Is this you?
Yeah, yeah. I just didn't know if any questions were coming in. So just some important takeaways, just feel free to talk openly with your family about your values and expectations. Well, really, while recognizing that decision making is a skill that needs to be taught and practiced and really individualized for each child and person in your family, quite frankly. And really just making that space for discomfort and use it as an opportunity, really to validate your child's experience really while continuing to help build their skills over time is really, really critical.
And then for me, just remember that responsible decision making is a lifelong process. Sometimes I'm shocked at 61, I still make a really poor decision. And I think to myself, are you kidding me? Really? But luckily at my age, I can try to catch it, fix it before somebody else notices it if I'm lucky. But it's really normal and healthy that that's what happens. To help children, help your students, help your child, remember that this is a skill. Like any other skill, it needs time to be practiced. You have to reflect on it and you have to learn through sometimes failing at it. And the failure has to become normalized with some of our students, and a lot of them don't experience that well based on the baggage, the luggage that they carry in. And it's critically important that we re-normalize that failure is also part of life, and it's a growthful part. And then, truthfully, the aspect of being connected in a technological evolving world is critically important. To be witnessed and seen, to be in communication and in community and in connection with each other, to practice the skills necessary to be safe and healthy in that space, to learn how to ask for help. I can't think of anything more that important than that.
I think that might be my new sign off, Rob. Stay connected, consistent, and present.
There you go.
Thank you all so much for joining us. A huge thank you to Rob and Tara for bringing their expertise to bear on tonight's topic of responsible decision making. We are so privileged that you were here tonight to share your experience, and thank you to all who attended for giving up your Tuesday night to talk about the importance of social emotional learning and responsible decision making. We will see you all soon. Thank you.